this office, so those matters of the past that have brought us to this point, or anything else, I suppose, of a public nature, to which I might provide answers. Have any of you questions or concerns, Major?
Well, since it's Sunday, I'll ask, did you go to services at Fruit and Cherish? And in general, what are your religious beliefs and practices?
Private none. A man's, or well, anybody's relationship with his creator is nobody's business save his own and the creator.
Sir, you say you're stepping away from public life, but if the United States needs you for some other action, political or perhaps diplomatic action, would you be willing to step in?
I can't imagine that they would lean on me for diplomatic actions. There's no way to answer that. I don't expect to. In fact, I come from a family that is cursed with short-lived deaths. I've already survived longer than I would have expected to. I've outlived not only my father and his father before him, but all of my brothers, both younger and elder. I can't imagine I have that many years left now.
How was Mount Vernon fared in your house?
Rather well. Like the rest of the nation, we're in far better circumstances than when the presidency began. It's one of the reasons why I didn't want this office, because just like most of you, my personal economy was in a disarray after the war, and in those few years intervening before the creation of our new system of government. But it has improved. It's still not. My house does not produce the profits it did prior to the war, still. And thank you for your service, I think, sir. I'm not sure I'm reading the cap. Oh, I wasn't.
Yes, sir.
I don't mean any offense. I wasn't meant to be a salute. I was trying to see, but
I'm saluting you, sir.
very well. So I did identify your cap properly.
Yes, sir.
My eyes aren't what they once were, and on top of it, I forgot not only my watch but my spectacles today.
How did the people come to choose you versus John Adams up north that wanted a very strong national government?
Oh, you misunderstand me entirely if you don't think I want a strong national government, sir. In fact, Mr. Adams and I have very similar political views.
Okay. Versus Thomas Jefferson, who wanted more autonomy within the state.
Well, so he claims now, yes.
Oh, okay.
But the answer to your question is simple: by election, sir. The President of the United States is chosen by an election amongst the Electoral College. In both elections we've had so far, well, I should probably mention how that works. There's an electoral agent. Each state has an electoral representative for each of its representatives to the entire legislature. So there's one for each of your senators and each of your congressmen. So the more populated states have more representation in the Electoral College. These members of the Electoral College each get 2 votes, one of which by law must be used for a candidate that is not from the state they represent. In those elections that have occurred so far, I was elected unanimously. Every one of those electoral agents has used one of their votes for me. So that's why, sir. Because the man who came in second, my vice president, that's why he's vice president. I didn't mention that, but that's how the vice president is chosen. He comes in second place, and that's Mr. Adams. So the reason that I was chosen over Adams or Jefferson is the votes.
As commander of the Revolutionary Forces, you suffered several major defeats, Manhattan, Brandywine.
I didn't conquer Manhattan. I lost Manhattan. So. Oh, I'm sorry. I must have misunderstood your first word. Because somebody just corrected me. I thought you said I'd conquered. I lost. Yes.
But how were you able to hold your forces together?
Not very well, sir.
Adversity?
Not very well, sir. That seems to be a myth nowadays. I had huge desertion problems throughout the war, sir. We were constantly fighting that issue. I think it may be the curse of a free nation that it will always be defended by the minority of its population, sir. and we found it very difficult to keep them. So, as you're implying with your question, the spirit, not only of the Army, the spirit of the country would rise and fall with our successes in the field. It was very difficult to keep our Army in the field, and we never kept large portions of it. We constantly suffered from desertion. We, of course, endeavored to prevent that. The more optimistic way was by hoping to, and attempting to gain victory. The attack on Trenton, the whole purpose of that was simply to raise the spirits of the Army, to try to get the men to re-enlist because their enlistments was about to expire in a week. So if we could gain a victory, that was the most useful way to keep men in the Army. The other reason is our other way we did so was the same way any Army does, by proper discipline. The punishment for desertions are death.
Would you like to write your memoirs to set things straight?
I have no intention of writing my memoirs, sir. I suffer a deficiency of education. I have been involved in a process of recording my some of the events of my life, but I'm not doing it. Not myself. One of my former secretaries is doing it, a man by the name of Colonel Humphrey. And so far, what I'll do with it, I'm not certain of. If I remember, I'll come back to that.
Does Mrs. Washington feel the same way you do about leaving life and going back to Mount Vernon?
Oh, not at all. I'm asked if my wife agrees or feels the same way I do. No, she's much more in favor of it than I am. My wife would have preferred I never took this position. She feels very much, she won't appreciate me sharing this with you, but she feels very much as if she is in a political prison because of my position. So I don't doubt at all that she longs for the day we return permanently to my family seat.
Who do you think who will follow you?
Whoever has the approbation of the people is represented by the votes of the Electoral College.
You have a thought on who you would like to see?
Absolutely, I do.
And who is that, sir?
I have a question.
You mentioned the Electoral College a couple of times. Can you talk about the wisdom of electing the president through the Electoral College as opposed to just simply a plurality of the people?
Oh, absolutely. How could that even be done, sir?
So the votes would be recorded by the state of the people who vote within the state.
For the president, sir?
Yeah.
You think that would work, sir? Let me ask you a question. Let's imagine that you were a Virginian living in the Ohio Valley, on the very edges of Virginia, probably in some home you've created yourself by felling trees. And if you're called upon to vote, provided you have enough property that you can vote, that's not always the case if you live in a place such as that. How are you going to know and choose between those candidates? Let's say I'll use the two names that were mentioned earlier. Let's say the only two names you even recognize on the ballot are Mr. Adams and Mr. Jefferson. What do you know of Mr. Adams? How can you know much of anything of Mr. Adams? So who would you probably vote for? You may not even know anything about Mr. Jefferson, but he's a Virginian. So you'd probably vote for him just because he's a Virginian. Is that the way to choose a president? No, it can't even be done, sir. So nobody ever argued for it, in fact.
So does that imply that people do not have either the wisdom or the intelligence?
No, it implies that we're too large. There's no way for them to know, sir. I'm not speaking of education or enlightenment. In fact, it's necessary to be a member of a free society to be enlightened, sir. No, the difficulty is more that we are a very large nation. In fact, there were 3 reasons that men who refused to ratify the Constitution did so. This gentleman mentioned one of them. Because there are still those men who, because of practices of the past or whatever, what have you, are far too beholden to the idea of the sovereignty of the states. That was one of the reasons. To be honest, another one of the reasons is the position I hold. Quite a few men were very nervous about the creation of an executive office whatsoever. After all, we had a great deal of difficulties with our previous executive offices under not, by this case,